Hey, what's up, y'all? It's Sikoski of Fun Day back at it once again, kicking in for you and for yours. And this one right here it's kind of a sad story. I'm just giving you off the jump, but this history has to be told, and I'm honored and privileged to give it to y'all, and and push it to y'all and let it know what's going on. Now, this one deals with about Liberia and Firestone. I'm gonna give a quick backdrop to the story. Many people know that some people don't know that Marcus Garvey and the U.N.I.A, the United Negro Improvement Association, was trying to buy land in Liberia, but was checked by the U.S. government in Firestone. You know what I'm saying? And this right here is looking at the relationship Liberia has since it made a decision to roll with Firestone instead of the U.N.I.A, which is really not talked about in history. But we're going to discuss it now. Firestone and the Way of the Warlord. The untold story of Firestone, Charles Taylor, and the Tragedy of Liberia by T. Christian Miller and Jonathan Jones, November 18, 2014. Now, I'm going to chop this up in the series. This is because, you know what I'm saying? So this is just the first part one of the series. Liberia. The killer launched from plantation under the waning moon one night in October 1992. They surged past 10 roof villages and jungle hideouts, down Mekong roads and red clay bush trails. More and more joined their ranks until thousands of men in long, raggedy columns moved towards the distant capital. Men in camouflage mounted rusty artillery cannons in a battery pickup truck. Then teenagers lugged rocket-propelled grenade launchers. Children carried AK-47. Some held long machetes. Killers wore ripped jeans and t-shirts, women's wig, and cheap rubber sandals. Grotesque masks made them look like demons. They were electric with drugs. They clutched talisman of a feather and bone to protect them from bullets. In the pre-dawn darkness, they surrounded Monrovia, the capital of Liberia. They loosed their attack on the sleeping city. Artillery slammed into stores and homes. Mortar echoed through the thick and humid air with the smell of rot. Boy soldiers canoed across mangrove swamps. As they pressed in, the killers forced men, women, and children from their home. They murdered civilians and soldiers. Falling shells just missed the U.S. Embassy hunkering in a high spot overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. A new phase of Liberia's civil war had begun. It would whoop savagely out of control over the next decade. More than 200,000 people would die or suffer terrible injuries, most of them civilians, limbs hacked off, eyes gouged out. Half of the country's population will become refugees. 5 American nuns will be slaughtered and become international symbols of the conflict of poverty. Orchestrating this anarchy was Charles Taylor, a suave egomaniac obsessed with taking over Liberia, America's most faithful ally in Africa. For the attack on October morning, he had built an army of butchers and believers empowered with the resources of one of America's most iconic businesses, Firestone. Firestone ran the plantation that Taylor used to direct the October 1992 assault on Monrovia. In operation since 1926, the rubber plantation was considered the largest of its kind in this world, a continuous swath of trees, mud-brown rivers, low hills, and burning bush at the time that spread across 200 square miles, roughly the size of the city of Chicago. Firestone wanted Liberia for its rubber. Taylor wanted Firestone to help his rise to power. In a pivotal meeting in the Liberian jungles in July 1991, the company agreed to do business with the Warlord. In the first detailed examination of the relation between Firestone and Taylor, an investigation by ProPublica and Frontline lays bare the whole role of the global corporation in the brutal African conflict. Firestone served as a source of food, fuel, trucks, and cash used by Taylor's ragtag rebel army, according to interviews, internal corporate documents, and declassified document cables. The company signed a deal in 1992 to pay taxes to Taylor rebel government. Over the next year, The company doled out $1.3 million in cash, check, and food to Taylor, according to an accounting and in court files. Between 1990 and 1993, the company invested $35.3 million in the plantation. In return, Taylor forces provided for security for the plantation and allowed Firestone to produce rubber and safeguard its assets. Taylor's rebel government offered low export taxes that gave the company a financial break on rubber shipments. For Taylor, the relationship with Firestone was about more than money. It helped provide him with some political capital and recognized he needed as sought to establish his credential as Liberia's future leader. We needed Firestone to give us international legitimacy, said John Toussaint T.J. Richardson, a U.S. trained architect who became one of Taylor's top advisors. We needed them for credibility. While Firestone used the plantation for business of rubber, Taylor used it for business of war. Taylor turned storage centers and factories on Firestone's sprawling rubber farm into despots for weapons and ammunition. He housed himself and his top ministers in Firestone homes. He also used communication equipment on the plantation to broadcast messages to supporters, propaganda to the masses, and instruction to the troops. Secret U.S. diplomatic cables from the time to capture Taylor's gratitude to Firestone. Firestone Plantation had been the lifeblood of the territory in Liberia that he controlled. Taylor told one Firestone executive, according to a State Department cable, Taylor later said in a sworn testimony that Firestone reaches had been the most significant source of foreign exchange in the early years of his revolt. In written responses to the question, Firestone acknowledged the agreement with Taylor, but said they never willingly assist Taylor's insurrection. The company said Taylor rebels had used Firestone trucks, food, medical supplies, fuel, and tool on an obvious threat of violence to anyone who considered stopping them. Firestone had no rise in the rise of Taylor. It had no role in his ability to hold power in Liberia, the company said. At no time did Firestone have a collaborative relationship with Charles Taylor, the statement said. The company activities focused on protecting its employees and property. The company had no ability to stop Taylor forces from using the plantation for any purposes. At the moment of the October 1992 attack that became known as Operation Octopus, Taylor controlled a vast majority of Liberia. He faced a weak interim government in Monrovia, backed by 7,000 largely untested soldiers from allied West African nations. Operation Octopus effectively plunged the country into 5 more turbulent, terrible years of intermittent war. Taylor turned a civil war between his forces and the Liberian government into a bloodbath as more rival factions joined in the fight for spoils, diamond, timber, and power. It was spilled into neighboring Guinea and Sierra Leone, where rebel forces allied with Taylor hacked off millions of civilians, and the terror campaign left brutally unchecked. In July 1997, Taylor won his war, and not on the battlefield. He was elected president, dominating 75% of the vote. For many Liberians, a vote for Taylor was a vote of resignation. Many believe it was the only way to stop the killing. After Taylor became president, more factions arose, more bloodletting, more revenge. Liberia and its people suffered yet again. In 2003, Taylor was indicted by an international tribunal for war crimes committed in Sierra Leone. He resigned his presidency, and he was eventually sentenced to 50 years, the first head of state to be convicted of crimes against humanity since the Nazi era. Here's a picture right here of Charles Taylor. We're going to go a little bit more deeper to his background, you know what I'm saying, because that needed to be discussed about too. You know, so here he is. We're going to go a little bit more deeper into him, you know, this guy. The path to cooperation was neither direct nor easy for Firestone and its executive, according to interviews and documents. Some company officials actively resisted working with Taylor and his fighters, even in the face of real and implied threats of physical violence. Other senior officers felt the company had no choice but to give in to Taylor's demand. They believed working with Taylor was the only way to protect thousands of impoverished Liberians who lived and labored on the plantation. They still basically, got, slaves. They patient, they're paying them like pennies, you know what I'm saying? these Liberians are still basically slaves. Firestone also received a conflicting direction from the United States government. One ambassador urged the company to work with Taylor. In Washington, diplomats warned Firestone executives about the dangers of doing business with him. But in the end, Firestone as a corporation and as a collection of men made a deliberate decision to cooperate with a man whose forces were publicly denounced as violent, vicious, and rapturous by the U.S. government and human rights groups. The United States State Department had issued a report blaming Taylor forces for killing civilians, raping women, and forcing hundreds of thousands of people to become refugees. Human Rights Watch said that Taylor forces had engaged in a killing campaign that targeted an ethnic group at risk of genocide. Today, Firestone maintains that at the time it struck its deal with Taylor, the guerrilla leader had no well-established records of human rights violations. It said that many other companies and world leaders had treated Taylor as a legitimate political figure. Other companies operating in Liberia at the time chose to leave, but some stayed on through the violence. Does Firestone believe it did the right thing? Yes. Firestone said it isn't decisions in Libya. Do we go along with former presidents, the U.S. State Department, the United Nations, and many leaders around the world who work with Taylor? And read this again. Do Firestone believe it did the right thing? Yes. Firestone said its decision in Libya. Do we go along with former president, U.S. presidents, the U.S. State Department, the United Nations, and many leaders around the world who work with Taylor regret the war criminal he became? Yes. So all these people was working when they all knew what he was doing. The decision that Firestone faced confronts American companies operating to this day in war-torn volatile regions and increasing globalized economy. All aim to make money. All must weigh to one degree or another the hierarchy of obligations to their shareholders, to their foreign workers, to their host countries, to their own sense of right or wrong. Donald Emerson served as a managing director for Firestone Plantation when Taylor invaded Liberia. He witnessed the violence firsthand. Taylor rebels killed and imprisoned his workers. They threatened Emerson with death at the point of a rocket-propelled grenade launcher. Emerson was let go by the company in October 1991. For the next 23 years, he kept silence about Firestone's choice to deal business with a warlord. Now he told Frontline and Publica he wanted to explain. He said he warned Firestone that Taylor was a killer. He told the company that working with him might be a crime. He urged him to avoid deals that might legitimize the guerrilla leader as the ruler of Libya. For him, the decision was clear. Firestone got it wrong. Certainly on behalf of our employees, the ones who were killed and suffered, it was a moral that we should recognize the guy that was the cause of all this, he said in an interview. Do I think they have blood on their hands? Yes, Rose said. I will not make the decisions they made. I believe they facilitated a warlord and insurrection and atrocities that he carried. Throughout the years, Liberia has been hesitant to examine its past. Taylor, for instance, was tried only for harm he caused in Sierra Leone, not in Liberia. In 2009, the country's Truth and Reconciliation Commission recommended sanctions for scores of perpetrators. It cited Firestone for having aided Taylor in carrying out his rebellion and called for more investigations. The Liberian government never acted out those recommendations. The stunning truth is that nobody has ever been punished in Liberia for the civil war that destroyed the nation. In fact, some of the people who wrecked the country are now the same people responsible for rebuilding it. Top officials who are formerly warring factions are now politicians passing laws in the legislature. They are pastors, preachers in the country's pulpits. They are executives running some of the country's largest businesses. The damage they inflict on Liberia haunts the country even today. Liberia's strategic infrastructure and weakened health system has struggled to cope with the spread of Ebola virus, which has killed thousands of Liberians. In an interview with Frontline and ProPublica, Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf announced that Liberia has not succeeded in shaking the Taylor regime or the devils of its history. Quote, the effects of the regime of the past are still with us today, and today we are a traumatized nation. Many efforts over the months to reach Taylor through his lawyers and families were not successful. Johnson Sharif looked thoughtful when asked to describe Liberia's relationship with Firestone. A Nobel Prize winner, she's a Nobel Prize winner, Johnson Sharif said the company had benefited Liberia with jobs and revenue. So she basically went up, the new president, she's still basically shaking hands with Firestone. Even though they know Firestone did all this dirt, all that stuff like that. Well, Firestone is giving us jobs and, they're paying revenue to the company. So, it's all good. In the fact, during the decades of operation, Firestone had built a nation within a nation. The company providing housing, school, food, and healthcare to workers and their families. Some 80,000 Liberians live within its borders. Firestone introduced currency, built roads, and opened the rural interior. At the same time, Johnson Sharif said, Firestone has sometimes failed to live up its obligation to the country whose peoples have provided with so much over many years. Over the decades, the company has faced accusations that exploited its labor, received unfair concession deals, and despoiled the environment and exacerbated corruption. Said Johnson, it's a mixed story. Warlord on the rise. Now this right here is a picture of Charles Taylor. As you see, it says Sheriff Department, Plymouth, Massachusetts, House of Corrections and Jail. So what is he doing in Massachusetts? You know what I'm saying? If he's from Liberia, what is he doing in Massachusetts? Well, let's find out what he's doing in Massachusetts. You know what I'm saying? Charles MacArthur U.N.I.A. Taylor was a man of many faces, a bureaucrat, a jailbreaker, revolutionary, orator, warlord, president, war criminal. Born in Liberia in 1948, Taylor came to the United States in 1972 to attend college. He received a degree in economics degree from Bentley College, a private school with a campus of brick buildings and leafy trees outside of Boston. In the United States, he was one of many young, educated Liberians in the 1970s, agitating for change in their home country. Taylor saw this chance in 1980 when a Liberian Army Master Sergeant named Samuel Doe seized control of the government. Doe manned Governor President William Tolbert and the president of manors that overlooked the turquoise ocean. They tied 13 government officials and public and political allies to wooden poles staked in the ground by a nearby beach and executed them. Doe was 28 and barely literate. To Taylors and other Liberians, he represented the overthrow of an old partition order that had long ruled the country. Taylor decided to join the revolution. Taylor was appointed head of the government procedure arm, the General Service Agency. The urbane, educated Taylor soon wrought a favor with Doe, who surrounded himself with thuggish fellow tribesmen. Taylor fled back to the United States amidst charges that he built the Liberian government for nearly $1 million. An ardent Cold War ally, Doe asked President Ronald Reagan's administration for his extradition. Taylor was locked up in a Massachusetts jail, waiting deportation. There, the myth of Taylor began. In September 1985, Taylor broke out the Plymouth County Jail. News reports said that he saw through the bars and descended on a knotted blanket and escaped through into the surrounding woods. How he accomplished defeat, if that indeed is how he escaped, has never been fully explained. At his war crimes trial, Taylor boasted that the CIA had aided the escape, a claim the agency has never confirmed or denied. Taylor made it to Mexico and eventually to Libya. There he received instructions at the military camp established by the Libyan strongman, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, to train African revolutionaries. In the late 1980s, Taylor and his cohort created the National Patriotic Front of Liberia, dedicated to overthrowing Doe. Doe had become wildly unpopular. He massacred thousands of rival tribesmen, surrounded himself with cronies, and driven the country into debt. In late 1989, the country was so broke that Doe convinced Firestone to provide advance on the future tax payments. On December 24th, 1989, Taylor began his revolution to overthrow Doe, obstinately a return of democracy to Liberia. It was at first chaotic. He launched his first coup d'etat not from the capital, but from the remote border crossings. He had a few dozen men, a proper source of weapons, and little ammunition. He was taken a long-time ally of the United States with little popular support and no military experience. Few people in either the United States or the Libyan government saw him as a serious threat. He wasn't on our radar, said Herman Hank Cohen, who back then was the Census Secretary of Africa. Now, Herman Hank Cohen, if you listen to some old Steve Coakley tapes, you know what I'm saying? He was Assistant Secretary for Africa, and his brother William Conan was the Defense Secretary under Bill Clinton. You understand? So, and they also, the Conan family also would cool with Christy Lagarde, who's the head of the IMF. That's one of their proteges. Just a little sidebar note, because a lot of people got a lot of hands in this. The IMF and all that stuff. Back to it. That soon changed. Doe badly bungled his response to Taylor, sending out troops to ruthlessly murder civilians. Angry men and women who had suffered the brunt of Doe's oppression began taking up arms and joining Taylor's innocent band. Taylor commanded his proper army that grew to thousands, led by a handful of trusted lieutenants, Libyan-trained mercenaries, and professional military men. Among the most notorious recruits were the small boy unit, young children, often orphans, who swore allegiance to Poppy, as Taylor was called. To prove their loyalty, the children sometimes had to gun down their mother and fathers. They would become among the most ruthless killers in a war of heartless, mindless, unfathomable thinking. As months passed and on his march towards Monrovia continued, Taylor's legend in Eagle only grew. He presented himself as a Baptist minister who neither smoked nor drank, a messianic speaker who would appear before adoring crowds dressed in fine white linen, finding promises of democracy, jobs, and better days. Other times, he wore camouflage and carried an AK-47. He would then take to the radio and announce an impending capture of a nearby town, and then magically do it. For many in Liberia, the spirit world remains close at hand. In such a place, Taylor becomes something more than a man, mythical, powerful, otherworldly. Taylor seized much of the country's rural and tribal interior, then his forces swept down an old railroad line built by the mining company to the Atlantic coast. Here he captured the country's second largest port, a jumble of docks and cranes in a rundown town of Buchanan. Hundreds of people were slaughtered as his soldiers settled old ethnic scores. Elementary and middle schools emptied as children flocked to join Taylor. Catholic nuns reported school attendance dropping from 3,000 to 1,000 students in one town. Children too young to carry rifles were given grenades instead. Taylor's eyes now turned west towards Monrovia, a capital of concrete and decay overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. Between his army and his ambitions lay an extraordinary treasure, the Firestone plant. Some 40 miles from the capital, the plantation had the country's most modern communication and electrical system. It had food, gas, vehicles. Right next to it sat the principal airport, Roberts International Airport. In the early days of June 1990, Taylor hurled his men forward. Old Southern Plantation. For more than 6 decades, the Firestone Plantation had spread across the coastal plain and the rolling hills of central Liberia. It was a kingdom of man, machine, and rubber trees, wedged between 2 tennis-stained rivers on some of the country's most fertile soil. At the center of this kingdom was House 53, reserved for the plantation boss. It stood on a hill overlooking the rest of the plantation, a 2-story antebellum-style Georgian colonial mansion of pink brick. It had a wide porch, 6 white Corinthian columns, and Joseph windows. Other homes for expatriates, including bananas and manicured gardens, were scattered nearby in a section of the plantation known as Harbor Hills. There was a 9-hole golf course, tennis court, and a country club with a bar. Here's a picture of the House 53 they're talking about. See, like a southern plantation. About 3 miles down the road was Harbor, Firestone-owned company town. A Palamatu formed with the names of business's founder, Harvey S. Firestone Sr., and his wife, Annabelle. On a side note, too, many people don't know Annabelle was a singer, and she from around here. She from her grandchild is William Henry Cleary Ford. You know, Ford got to deal with this too. Because Firestone, if you notice, Firestone tires go on Ford vehicles. You know what I'm saying? So Ford had their hand playing in this too. So when they family married, when the Firestone and the Ford family married, you understand what I'm saying? They had to backtrack to the Ford vehicles. So Firestone tires and the Ford vehicles, they go hand in hand. It held Firestone central office and central industrial garages and a latex processing plant of ammonia and other chemicals. The town itself was a collection of 10 roof homes, a shop, a grocery store, a bank, school, and brick and center bungalows for mid-level Liberian managers and domestic staff. A soccer field ran along the edges of town. On the weekends, Firestone would show movies outdoors. The ground was meticulous. Thus, cut grass and a neat row of rubber trees within the undergrowth cleared out. The order and the precision immediately marked the plantation as different from the rest of the rigorous, overgrown country. Beyond the town was trees, rows upon rows of trees, more than 8 million Havana Brazilian plants presented in a neat line. Hidden in the groves of the bush were dozens of work camps connected by roads that laced the farms. These were homes of trappers, the Liberian workers who did the hard work of extracting the latex sap from the trees. The camps were long rows of residents, almost like coops, or like, slave dens. The units were generally consisted of one room. The home had a wattle and swub walls and aluminum roof. There was no windows or no kitchens. The camp had communal pumps for water and outdoor kitchens for cooking. There was no electricity. The bathroom was outhouses or the nearby bush. Every day, trappers got up and worked before dawn. They cut thin slashes in the rubber trees with sharp knives, careful not to cut too deep or too often. The sap would run into small cups, raw latex, the source of natural rubber. Thousands of workers labored to meet their daily quotas by tapping hundreds of trees. To meet their demand or surpass them to make more money, the trappers sometimes put their wives and children to compete with their tasks. The collected latex was poured into a giant metal buckets, which held each of the 75 pounds of sap. They were carried by two at a time by workers holding wooden yokes across their shoulders. The latex would be weighed, and the workers got a few dollars a day. From there, the sap would be processed to hundreds of blocks of rubber or indicating liquid latex. At the end of a good year, pun intended, a good year, the daily and delicate task of gathering of thousands of teeny cups produced tens of thousands of tons of rubber. The raw material was shipped out to factories around the world, becoming car tires, rubber hoses, hospital gloves, and condoms. This was the world of the Firestone operation, described in 1990 by one of the company executives as assembling an old southern plantation. After years of the corn and routine, it was about to become a grotesque battlefield. The War Machine. Taylor's War Machine was sighted near the Firestone factory at 7 a.m., June 5th, 1990. Emerson, the plantation boss, woke to find Taylor fighters on the other side of the slow-moving Farmington River, the eastern border between the Firestone farm and the rest of Liberia, wearing red bandanas. The rebels sang song and danced on the bank some 400 feet away, waving U.S. dollar bills and brandishing automatic rifles. Tough, pragmatic, and taciturn, Emerson was not surprised by the arrival of the men. Grim Story's face raced ahead of Taylor's swarm. On April 6th, Emerson had issued a strict confidential memo to 40 or so U.S. and foreign national staff workers who oversaw the plantation of Liberian workers. Right, so he just gave it to the foreign staff, you know what I'm saying? The U.S. workers. This is what he wrote. Going to the current and unstable political situation in Liberia, we believe it's prudent to plan for the worst case scenario, he wrote. The memo instructed expats to pack emergency supplies, gas up cars, and meet up secret rally points in case of evacuation. The information contained in this memo, even its very existence of this memo, should not be discussed with persons not covered by it, he wrote. By May, the company had sent home expats and wives. To the persons not covered by the memo, the Liberian workers and their family, Emerson projected confidence as a maelstrom drew closer. On April 28th, he met with 180 Liberian staffers who was near panic at Taylor's approach. Emerson told them that they should be calm as they would have nothing to fear, a company memo said. He told Liberian managers and workers that the fighters would simply pass to the plantation on the way to attack the capital. In an interview, Emerson said he warned employees that Firestone would not be able to protect them if Taylor troops overran the plantation. He said he told them, our responsibility as an American company is to expats, he told them. This is your country, and you should take whatever action jointly or individually that you can take. So basically, he told the Liberians that you are on your own when that man come through. On a June morning, when the rebels massed on the riverbank and mortars thumped in the distance, Emerson directed his staff to carry out some last-minute errands. He sent Steve Ramo, the company's accounting manager, to drive a pickup truck to the plantation to ensure that the workers got their weekly pay before the rebels crossed the river. Upbeat and optimistic, Ramo joked with Emerson that he would hang out his arm in the window to make sure the fighters know that he was white. Yaka, yaka, yaka. He knew at that time that the rebels went out to hurt us, Ramo said. We weren't really involved in the fray. As the fighters began crossing the rivers in rough-hewn canoes, they called out some soothing promises. They showed they had no interest in harming workers and were only interested in soldiers. Emerson wrote in the journal that he kept during the invasion. Whether or not Emerson believed the rebels, many Liberian workers did. When the fighters finally reached the Firestone side of the river just before noon, some workers celebrated. To them, Taylor men were freedom fighters come to overthrow Doe, Liberia's revealed dictator. Women undulated in the main market streets. They waved their hands above their head. Freedom fighter, some shouted. Matt Chipley, a skinny teenager who lived with his family on the plantation, watched as some fighters enter the town, guns held high. People were jubilating. People were happy to receive Taylor, he said. They were in poverty and things were hard for them, and nothing good was going on. Mary Pauline, a young mother of three children, whose husband worked in Firestone General Electric Generator Plant, remembered that the rebels seemed concerned about the people's safety. All of you go in the house, they shouted to the visitors. When the rebels entered, they're not killing nobody, she said. Arthur Whelan, a college student and the son of Emerson's cook, raced down the river's edge to watch young boys with wigs on their heads and AK-47 in their hands spread out through the plantation. This is going to be good, he remembered. These guys are in town. They want to liberate people. Michael Mubah Sr., a Liberian manager who had gone to college in the United States and lived on the plantation, recalled the excitement over the prospect that the motley militia might overthrow Doe. We thought that they were our saviors, she said. Mandela's violence and church roll killers. It took only a day for the saviors to turn into devils. The first person the rebel killed after crossing the river, according to several witnesses, was a mentally handicapped man. He was gunned down the street. Next, the rebel began hunting down people who belonged to tribes closely associated with the ruling regime. Kevin Estall, a British expatriate who was Firestone's agricultural operation manager, recalled seeing piles of dead bodies of Liberians laying outside the Harbor supermarket. He was told that the rebels had executed the men in public because they were from rival tribes. They had been snitches, riddled with bullets from AK-47s straight up and down in their bodies. He said they were left in the streets and their bodies began swelling in the sun. Mubah was huddling in his bungalow when several Taylor rebels demanded that he leave immediately. Several boy soldiers gathered him, and his eyes red, guns dragging on the ground behind him. Mubah fled with 2 pairs of pants and some shirts. Taylor was like an eagle, Mubah said. He'd come at you with his claws hidden until he wanted to take them out. Over the next couple of days, the rebels hunted down members of rival tribes, eating and killing them. They took Firestone trucks, fuel, and rice. They imprisoned the Firestone police force in the plantation jail. Whelan, the cook's son, was able to hide us in the small camp where he heard screamings all around him. A squad of children jumped out from the bush holding automatic weapons. They wore maroon choir robes, which they had stolen from the church on the plantation. Too big for the boys, the robes trailed on the ground. They dragged raggedy and dusty. They trimmed raggedy and dusty. The boys believed that Whalen was a government soldier. They had him raise his pants legs so they believed that soldiers wore boots and left marks on their wearing calf. They found no marks and let Wiener pass. It was terrifying. They had AK-47s, guns pointed straight at you, called Wiener, who now works as a bank examiner in the United States. They're like, if you lie, we're going to kill you. And you are trembling and shaking. 4 days after the rebel invasion, government soldiers counterattacked, pushing the rebels back into the bush. They scoured harbor for rebel collaborators, rounding up scores of Firestone workers. The soldiers, members of the Armed Forces of Liberia, went on their own rampage. They beat and tortured Firestone workers who were suspected in assisting Taylor's rebels. They, the Armed Forces of Liberia, raped women, forcing loved ones to watch. They dumped bodies in the plantation drainage ditches. The plantation turned menacing and surreal. Shadows dart throughout the rubber trees, corpses stuck out of the weed-covered ditches, artillery pounding like bass drums into the early hours of the night. Neighbors turned on each other. One boy pointed to the MPFL soldiers, the 2 Firestone workers from a targeted tribe. Taylor rebels slit their throat. A few days later, the dead man's family handed over the boy to the government soldiers. They executed him behind Firestone Bank. Caught in the foxfire was Chipley and his family. The soldiers accused him of being spies. As teenagers watched, soldiers flogged his mother and father. Chipley, who worked for Firestone processing plant, was tied up by the soldiers. Young girls that he knew were raped, he said. Chipley and scores of other plantation workers decided to follow the example of the other Liberians brutalized by those soldiers. They joined Taylor's forces. They fled the rebel outposts in the northern part. They fled to the rebel outposts in the northern part of the plantation and began training. Upon God and man, I never thought the day I'd be holding what they call a gun, Chipley said. Because of the ill treatment, I was forced to join. There were plenty that joined, he said. The obligation. The battle ensued and many expatriates headed for House 53. Scoring on the hill, Emerson and his fellow expatriates were protected from the killings below. So they weren't touching the white folks. They put them on the hill in House 53, that building I showed you, like a Georgia plantation, and they survived that. The man pressed time playing cards and listened to BBC reports about the war. Emerson smoked his pipe and practiced his golf game, using a pitch wedge to play short chip shots in a nearby bucket. Still, the executives could not escape the violence. Rifle fire crackled all around them. The power was out for days. Reports streaming of 9 bodies in one camp, high casualties in another. Conflicting rumors that had the rebels in control of the plantation one day, government soldiers coming to the rescue the next. For those long used to control, confusion reigned. Very awkwardly and potentially dangerous for us, our people and our assets. Emerson described it as the battle for the Firestone Rage. Will there be confrontations? Who will be in control? How are we dealing with the changing demands? The last question was a daily challenge. John Vesebron, Emerson's number 2 and plantation controller, had withdrawn an equivalent of $10,000 in cash from Firestone's safe before he saw shelter in House 53. It was, he figured, the best way to please the fires, who were often drunk, angry, and up. As the rebels' commander steamed into the mansion with demands, Emerson carefully took notes in his journal. One commander got $500 to ensure their safety in Harbor Hills area. Another fighter received 100 gallons of gas, 5 bags of rice, and $40. Emerson headed yet another group, Firestone Truck 63A, the oldest available. On occasions, he resisted. Tough talk prevented the theft of vehicles and personal computer. There seemed to be no one in charge. Overall, no commander to contact. We were totally helpless, Emerson sprawled after days of demand at gunpoint. By the third day, a huge crowd of some 1,500 to 2,000 panicked Liberians headed for House 53. For decades, plantation and Firestone have provided them with food, shelter, and safety. Now they beg for protection from the savagery. Discipline parted the crowd as it walked up the long, broad lawn leading to House 53. There was nothing that Firestone can do, he told them. Firestone chefs cooked up a big pot of rice, which was distributed among the crowd. We are all in this together. We have no way to protect you or ourselves. We as scared as you, John Fizzle recalled telling the people. There is nothing we can do to protect you. It's better off to go to your villages. The next day, several dozen senior Liberian staffers, people who worked directly with the expats, who considered them friends and colleagues, approached them in the second time for hopes of rescue. Some of the Firestone staff said, well, if the Patriots are going out to Emerson House and it's safe, the rebels are not going to go there to bother anyone, said Wheeling, who joined a stream of refugee seekers. There should be sanctions for everyone. This time, Emerson stood on the porch and delivered a response. There is nothing the company can do for them. We recognize the responsibility to our employees, but what can we do? Our position got so untenable. There's nothing we could do about 1,000 to 1,500 or 40 or 50 Liberians, Emerson said in an interview. The decision did not sit well with some expats. A star refused to take shelter in Emerson House. He holed up in his own home nearby, taking several Liberians who pleaded for refuge. They felt they had been betrayed, as Stahl said of Firestone's Libyan staffers. They felt let down by Emerson for not offering them any shelter. The rejection stunned the Liberians. Firestone employees had a difficult believing that such a powerful corporation, one with so much sway in Liberian capital and so much money in its bank account, could not help in any way. Actually, it could help, but the aid will only be worth for the expats. On June 13, at 5:30 in the evening, Taylor's sister widows confronted Emerson on the front porch of House 53. The expats recognized several of the fighters as men who had worked as caddies on Firestone's golf course. The commander planted a rocket-propelled grenade launcher at Emerson and threatened to blow up the house. He demanded $1,000. Emerson convinced the man to leave for the truck in 200. During the takeover, Emerson had maintained radio contact with the embassy and Firestone headquarters in Akron, Ohio. Now he called them again. It was time to leave. The U.S. Embassy sent military escorts to accompany the Firestone expats to safety. Just after dawn, 19 expats in 17 vehicles headed to Gate 15 in the northwest entrance of the plantation. Special forces made sure they arrived safely in Monrovia. The Liberians workers woke to find themselves abandoned. Justin Knuckles, a senior Liberian manager, had taken refuge in a Firestone community center with other Liberian staff. He remembers finding a note on the door from one of the expatriates apologizing for their departure. They just played and they just gave him a Dear John letter. You know, Dear John, won't you read this? I'll be gone. He just played him scurvy. The note said they would return when the situation calmed down. You know the feeling when Jesus was taken and the disciples were left alone? That's how we felt. And that line right there sums up just black people in general. You know, that white Jesus complex. Like the white man's going to save you. No, it's not going to happen. You know, when Jesus was taken and the disciples were left alone, that's how we felt, Knuckles said, because we had belief as long as the Americans on the plantation, we had a little hope. Now the Americans are gone, what's going to happen to us? Raymond said leaving behind employees was disheartening. Looking back, however, he couldn't think of no other way that Firestone would evacuate all the employees on the plantation. Our hands were tied, he said. We had no U.S. Army or Marines or whatever to come in and help us evacuate these hundreds of thousands of people who have been affiliated with Firestone one way or another. It's hard to process sometimes. In humanity of man towards man, said Raymond, who was now a business consultant and a Christian minister. Certainly, evil was taking reins in Liberia. The expats headed home. The final scrawl in Emerson's journal was, what an ordeal. Emerson arrived in Akron some 24 hours later after evacuation. At the press conference, he recounted the story of the rebel invasion and the RPG pointed at his chest. His biggest concern, he said, was for the workers. I personally have an obligation to many thousands of employees in Harveston, Emerson told reporters. Everybody run away. As Emerson spoke in the press, Molly probably drudged through the thick bush trying to keep her shattered family alive. A group of government soldiers had burst into Polly's mud-walled home on the Firestone plantation just before the expats were evacuated. They dragged her and her husband Joseph outdoors. They stripped him into his underwear in front of their three children. They began beating and kicking the couple, accusing them of working with Taylor rebels. When you want to cry, they beat you, they said. You want to die? You want to die? You would die right now, Polly said. They hard that day. They were not easy. The soldiers hauled away. The soldiers hauled away her bleeding husband. They marched back later demanding a ransom for his return. Polly had on what little she had. The soldiers next day returned a day later. They asked for 500 more. When she told them that she didn't have it, the soldiers gained prey for her. They told her to kill her and her children. The next day, the soldiers killed her husband behind a whitewashed cinder block bank in Harbor. Polly decided to flee the surrounding jungle with her children. Just before leaving, she remembered hearing that the Firestone patch had been evacuated. It made little difference to Polly and her children. They plowed through the bush, eating sugar cane to survive, weary, afraid, and hungry. A few days into her truck, Polly noticed that a 3-year-old boy was strapped to her back had stopped moving. Monko, her youngest, has died. Polly was crazed with grief. She had held the child in front of her, stumbling through the bush. She ran to a stranger who helped her bury the boy in the wild. After days in the jungle, Polly and her remaining children reached Katana, a rebel-held town, just outside the plantation. Her ordeal was not over. In a recent interview, Polly sat dignified and graceful on the couch in her teeny-tiny home beneath a mango tree in the suburb of Monrovia. She remains angry at Firestone. Why hadn't the fire company stood firm against the rebels? Why hadn't the Firestone police tried to stop the assault? Why hadn't the company asked for government soldiers to stay back? Nobody was there to protect the worker. Nobody, she said. They went with her children, their wives, and everybody. Nobody was left there. And when they left, that's the time people started raising hell with us. Still, she said, she's understood. When it comes to war, she said, everybody runs away. And that's part one of this story. You know what I'm saying? This is what happened. I know it's kind of long and it's kind of sad, but this is what happened at the Firestone when the Liberian government, we'll get more deep into this in part two. This Marcus Garvey, you know what I'm saying? They won the bomb with the U.N.I.A. Won the bomb with Firestone. And this is the aftermath of it. Well, Firestone, U.S. Corporation, U.S. State Departments, we're going to find some other people like France, Japanese, Japan, a whole lot of people involved. We're going to find a lot more in different parts of this series. But, you know, when you don't think, when the world of wars, you don't think race first, other groups just come in and just tear yourself apart. And this is what's happening, y'all. So, much love to y'all for listening. Subscribe to the channel. This is Koski of Fun Day. Show me some love on the Cash App. You know what I'm saying? We're going to start making this movement happen, you know. Show me some love on that, you know what I'm saying? And hit the like button. Much love to you and yours. Peace.